let's just jump right into it.
This video is going to be mostly focused around World v World roaming, although you can probably translate a lot of this to PvP. And if you want to run like a Sage Amulet or something like that in PvP, you can do that. That works. All right, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to be running Celestial. I think it's the most optimal choice for World v World roaming, and even like a 1v1 scenario, I would even take Celestial, at least currently. That's my current belief. So yeah, it's essential to hit hard on a Weaver, but you also have to take the blows. You got to take the damage, you got to heal the damage, and Celestial will give you all of that, and you'll get more stats. And okay, so you may be wondering why I've chosen Dagger instead of Focus. Focus is a good option, and I'm not going to discriminate against you if you want to run it, but I don't feel like it works well with a Sword Weaver gameplay style. So let's compare the two. So with the Focus, you have 6 condition cleanses, no mobility, no evades, 1 invuln, which is very good, 2 CCs, 2 projectile hate skills, also known as like a reflect or a projectile block. And the fire skills, in my opinion, are pretty underwhelming on the Focus. They don't burn for very much. They don't do very much power damage. Yeah. So Dagger has 5 condition cleanses,
1 mobility skill,
1 evade, no invulns, and 2 CCs. The fire skills burn for a lot and they do a lot of damage. So yeah, if you want to run Focus, that's look, it's fine. But I'm going to recommend Dagger because I think Dagger is better. I think that Dagger is more aggressive. I think you can hit harder with Dagger. I think you can sustain just as well with Dagger. Oh, by the way, did I mention that Dagger has 2 heals? If you pop Water 4, it is a heal. It's also a condition cleanse. It's part of your condition cleanse. And you've got Dagger 5 on Water, which is a pretty significant heal as well. So I run Dagger for sustain, and I run Dagger for damage, I think, and also for mobility. I think it's the better choice. But look, if you want to run Focus because you need the game to hold your hand, then go ahead. Sigils. There is only one sigil that is essential to this build. You need the cleansing sigil. It requires at least a 400 rating in either, I hope I'm saying this right, Artificer. In either Artificer, Huntsman, or Weaponsmith. If you don't have any of these already, weaponsmithing is quite useful, and it's currently quoted by guildwars2crafts.net as only costing about 41 gold to train to 400, so it's not that much. If you think 41 gold is a lot, then you probably don't play World v World often, or you don't play this game very often. The other sigil that people might tell you is essential is the Sigil of Energy, and it's true that the sigil is very good, it's very useful, and you could even argue that it's the optimal choice. I'm not gonna argue against that too much, maybe a little bit. I think you already have enough vigor uptime. I think you've got vigor up the asshole, and I think you simply don't need the energy sigil. Look, there's a lot of other sigils you can use in its place, and maybe none of them will give you quite such a dramatic effect as the energy sigil, at least in World v World, but I just don't need it. So here are my other recommendations for your secondary sigil. You could run Smoldering. Some people might tell you that burn duration is useless on Fireweaver. This is partially true, but it's partially untrue. Because remember that your primordial stance, it burns for around 3 seconds per each tick. Yet it is one of your biggest sources of damage. So increasing 3 seconds to 5 seconds is absolutely not insignificant, I would argue, as it will not always be cleansed that quickly, especially when you're pulsing so much of it. But you will be okay without it, so you don't need burn duration. You don't need to really worry too much about burn duration. You should have enough already with this build. But you could run a little bit more if you want to. If you want to, right? Okay, so Concentration Sigil. It's a reasonable choice. Personally, I don't use it. I think it's a decent choice, but I just don't use it. Generosity. This is the sigil I've been playing around with recently, and I don't actually know if it's good yet, honestly, but this is what I'm currently playing around with. I will say this, it's very nice seeing myself stacking like 7 to 8 torment stacks on the enemy because I've transferred it with that sigil. It's very nice when you're fighting a Condi heavy opponent. The generosity sigil is quite good, I think. but I don't know for sure. Okay, moving on. When it comes to runes, a lot like Sigils, it's subject to your own individual judgment. It's a judgment call, whatever you think is best. I'm going to recommend pack runes because pack runes, I think, is the perhaps the best bang for your buck. If you're running full Celestial especially, this is probably going to be one of the best rune choices that you could make. It will bring your precision above 40%, or at least it should, and it provides boon duration, power, and gives Fury and Might every 30 seconds. Antitoxin runes are a rune that I've run quite a lot. If you look back in my videos, you will see I've run that rune quite a bit, and they're very useful, okay? When you're fighting a Condi heavy opponent, it's very useful. It's especially useful when you're fighting 1vX and perhaps you're fighting against like 2 or 3 Scourges, or there's a Condi Mirage in the mix. Honorable mentions for rune choices. Zephyret runes are very fun. When your opponent thinks that you can't catch up to them, you use a leap finisher on a fire or a water field and get 3 seconds of super speed to close the gap. So note that when I run Zephyret runes, I also switch my Celestial chest and leg pieces to Marauders, and that's to make up for the lack of precision. God, I hope I'm saying this right. Balthasar rune will boost your health by 10% while increasing your burn duration and Condi damage. Holbrak rune is maybe worth some consideration if your precision is already above 40%. And finally, durability runes are nice, but they're a little bit weak.
I guess you could run Flame Legion Rune if you want to be super bossy, lols.
So now we get to look at the build. We're going to be running Fire, Arcane, and Weaver. In Fire, we run Burning Precision because it increases our burn duration and will cause a random burn. Smothering Auras, we run this because it is your best source of Condi Cleanse. Attuning to Fire and using Water 4 both become Condi Cleanses with this trait. Pyromancers, oh god, tutorial is really challenging me with these words. Puissance, fuck, I can't even. Pyromancers put me. With this skill, you simply have to wave your sword around in the air to get over 20 stacks of might. So try this. Attune to fire, get in combat, and just swing your sword around. Yeah, you get 22 stacks of might. It's nice. It's nice, good trait. Arcane Abatement, this skill will provide passive healing as you make your way through your rotations. Final Shielding, we run this because it provides a 4th stun break and blocks 3 attacks when you reach the threshold. Evasive Arcana, we run this for the heals, blast, and burn effects while dodging in different attunements. Finally, in the Weaver trait line, we have Master's Fortitude, we run this for more vitality, Bolstered Elements for stability, Invigorating Strikes for vigor and barrier. And for food, we're going to be using the Bowl of Orion Truffle and Meat Stew, or you could also use the Loaf of Saffron Bread, which is a cheaper option and is quite good as well. I just want to note this about food. Don't use stat food. You have enough power, you have enough damage, you have enough sustain, relatively speaking. I would use a food that is going to give you a unique effect. So for example, Loaf of Saffron Bread decreases the incoming Condi duration and stun duration. That's very helpful. Bowl of Orion Truffle and Meat Stew will allow you to dodge more often. So you always want to go for the effect, not the stats. You already have enough stats. Don't worry about your stats for food. So now that we've covered the basics of the build, it's time to examine our practices in combat. This is the most fundamental part of this tutorial. Having the build is one thing, but you have to know how to play it. So let's take a look at that. So, number 1, being skilled in movement, reaction time, and knowing what skill is appropriate to use at any given moment will help you more than any amount of vitality and toughness ever will. So, basically what I'm saying is don't compensate for your mistakes by making your build too tanky. Full Celestial is all that you need. I assure you it works very well if you let it. You should train yourself to make good use of what is available to you at any given moment and not give in to the urge to compensate for mistakes by getting tankier. And also don't forget how much movement can impact your gameplay. If you want to practice your movement, which if you're not already very good at it, you can get good at it just by playing the game, of course, but if you really want to practice it, you really want to get better at movement, I would recommend you find a friend or a guild friend especially who is willing to help you train. So ask them to run away from you, like go to a guild hall and go into the dueling arena and ask them to run away from you using any mobility skills that they have at their disposal, while you run after them trying to hit them. The basic exercise is to try to see if you can turn within their radius, cut them off, maybe even use mobility skills to get to them. You know, see how good you are at actually catching up to people. And number 2, so you should know what does damage and what erases damage. So this one you can do by yourself. I'm going to outline the basic rotation for you, and then you should do your best to try to follow along. You can alter these rotations based on your situations in the future, but when you're just starting out, it's important to know the basic rotation. So let's take a look. The offensive rotation. Preferably you start in fire and earth, and note that you may want to make use of the earth skills, but in this rotation we're not going to worry about that yet. So let's begin by casting our fire earth dual skill for barrier. Now cast fire 2 to leap forward, and while you do this you pop your primordial stance and glyph of elemental power. As soon as you have landed from casting fire 2, you immediately attune to fire again so that you can use fire 3. Then you can use fire 4 and 5, and the reason you would stay in fire in this rotation is because you're pulsing burn with primordial stance. So now you can finish this rotation by either attuning to water or air, depending on what you think is necessary. So this is where the situation comes in. This is where you have to make a decision when you're fighting. But for now, you can just choose one and practice it. So if you attune to air at this point, it's going to give you the biggest damage burst if you can hit it. But attuning to water will give you regeneration and access to Riptide, which is your best healing skill. Now, I would estimate that there are quite a few weavers who are perhaps practicing and trying to get better at it who don't realize that the water-fire dual skill is really good. I mean, okay, it's not OP. It's not that great, but it's pretty good. So use it. Use the water-fire dual skill and see if you can hit it. It's kind of hard to hit. It's very short range. You have to get good at that. You gotta get good at it. Okay, you just gotta practice. You just gotta practice, right? So you should also keep in mind that every attunement has a third skill that is usually hidden by your dual attacks. So for example, Air 3 hits very hard and applies vulnerability. I would recommend finding a way to fit this into your fights whenever possible. The best time to fully attune to an element like air is when the enemy is healing themselves or not currently attacking you. So you have to be watching like a hawk. You have to be watching, and this is why practicing comes in handy, because once you don't need to worry about what you are doing, you can worry about what the enemy is doing, what your opponent is doing. And once you can pay attention to what they're doing, and you can say, geez, they look like they're healing. They look like they're not about to attack me. I have like 3 or 4 seconds, so I can do anything. So in that time, you should double attune to air, for example, so you can get that skill ready. So Earth 3 and Water 3 are worth mentioning, but don't go out of your way to cast these. Water 3 can potentially save your life if you pull it off, but I don't know, is it really worth it? Maybe. Earth 3 applies some useful bleed stacks, and I think I actually have an example of me using it, but generally speaking, I don't use it that much, and you probably won't either. Just be aware that these skills exist.
Defensive rotations.
So both of these are going to be worth using at different times. Let's take a look at both. Defensive rotation number 1, which I would say is intermediate. It's a little bit easier than the second one. Basically, you attune to water, and you cast Weave Self, if that's available. And we're going to get into that in a moment. So you attune to water, cast Weave Self. Now you dodge, if you're in combat, of course. You dodge for a large heal and a condition cleanse. Then use Riptide and attune to Earth. Now blast your water field with Earth and Vortex, that's Earth 2, and assess whether or not you will need to use your Water 4 and 5 skills. If you don't need to use them, don't waste them. You might have even seen me in my videos doing that before, and that's not something you should be doing. Don't waste them. Okay, but here's the thing. If you have 4,000 health that you could heal, like let's say you have 20,000 maximum health, and you're at 16,000, yeah, use your Water 4 and 5 skills, because you want to keep yourself... If you've ever played RuneScape, and you've heard the term safing, safing in a PvP match, or dual fight, whatever, you basically want to safe like you're playing RuneScape. You want to be constantly eating those lobsters, constantly eating those swordfish, shark, whatever the fuck it is. I don't know what they eat in RuneScape these days. I don't play RuneScape anymore, but that's basically the idea. You want to heal yourself whenever you can. You don't want to heal yourself when you need to. You want to heal yourself before you need to. Otherwise, you won't have enough time, and you won't be able to put pressure on them. You won't be able to put offensive pressure on them because you'll be too busy healing yourself up. Sometimes. Not all of the time. There are no absolutes, okay? There are no absolutes. But generally speaking, that's the case. Try to heal when you can. And note that if you want to be really pro, like Silofrag, you can step outside your water field while in Earth, then dodge back in to blast it a second time. And that would occur after you've used your Earth and Vortex skill. Or Earth 2. And then you would use Water 4 and 5.
Defensive rotation number 2.
This one's a little bit more difficult. So, let's start in Water, Earth, Water, and Earth. And again, we're going to cast Weave Self, if it's available. You dodge to heal, then you use Riptide, Earth 4 to blast, then begin casting Earth 5 for a second blast, and quickly attune to Earth, now use Earth 2 for a third blast, followed by Water 4-5 if necessary. I don't think you'll have enough time to do the dodge into the water field when you do this rotation, so if you can make it happen, then go for it, but I don't think I've been able to. But yeah, this is a better healing burst than the first one. You're gonna be healing more, but it's a little bit specific. You have to be in Water Earth when you start, so that's why I'm including both rotations. A lot of the time you won't be in Water Earth, so a lot of the time you're just gonna be using defensive rotation number 1. And note about beginning a fight. Just a little note here. Sometimes it's good to poke them with your water stick and wait until they attack you first, at which point if your reaction time is fast enough you can use Riptide to evade, followed by Earth and Vortex to evade again if necessary. And the idea here is that if you don't need to heal anything, then you won't need those skills to heal. You can go right on the offensive, right back on the offensive, put pressure on them right after you evade. You evade their burst, especially if you can bait out their initial burst, and then you put your pressure out on them so that they start panicking and going on their heals. It's just a big tug of war. Just a big tug of war, right? You want to play as many mind games with your opponent as you can. Note about Primordial Stance. When using this build, this skill will provide around 5 seconds of stability while pulsing AoE Burn, Chill, Vulnerability, or Bleed depending on what attunement you are currently using. So fully attuning deals the same condition twice. So for example, if you are fully in Fire attunement, this is what happens just by using 2 of your utility skills. Using Primordial Stance to apply vulnerability before or after applying Burn is a good idea. So you can accomplish that by going through the offensive rotation that I've just discussed. And when you attune to Air, you would be attuning to Air because Air is going to apply the vulnerability with Primordial Stance. When you attune to Air, it's automatically going to start pumping out that vulnerability instead of Burn. That's how you apply vulnerability. You can also do the same thing with Chill. Chill is very useful against other Weavers. I would estimate it's very useful against a Warrior. It's actually pretty useful against everyone.
Note about Weave South.
Note about Weave South. This skill will give you unique bonuses after you attune to an element for a duration of 20 seconds. So attuning to Fire will give you plus 20% Condi damage. Water will provide plus 20% boon duration and healing to others. Air will increase movement speed by 50%, and Earth decreases incoming damage by 20%. All of these effects are extremely useful. This is one of your best skills. I normally use this just for the damage reduction first, and you also get 5 seconds of stability just for using this skill initially. Once you've attuned to all 4 elements, you'll be given the option to get rid of your bonuses and unleash a powerful AoE float CC, and you must stand still to cast it or it will not work. It's very good CC. Now the only additional note I'm going to say about that is don't waste the CC, especially don't immediately attune to all 4 and then go for the CC, because one, if they're very smart, If your opponent is very adept, they are going to see that coming. They're going to be watching for it. They'll probably have stability anyway. And the second thing is that the bonuses that you actually get from having that up and not using the CC are so good that you might not even want to use the CC. But if you see an opportunity to use it and it looks like a good one, yeah, go for it.
Glyph of elemental power.
This skill will cause your next 4 attacks to deal a condition based on your attunement. Additionally, while this is not completely included in the description, this skill also gives you plus 25% power damage for your next 4 attacks. And the skill is also a stun break on a short cooldown. So with this skill and Twist of Fate, you will have 3 stun breaks available to you, plus your passive Arcane Shield, which will provide a 4th stun break when you reach 50% health. Note on mobility. You have 2 mobility skills with Dagger, and 2 semi-mobility skills on Sword. So Air 2 is a Shadow Step. Will give super speed if it interrupts an enemy, but don't worry too much about that. If you can interrupt them, that's fine, but most of the time I just use it for the Shadow Step. Air 4 is a 1200 range mobility skill, which is very useful. And while I'm talking about Air, let me quickly mention that Air 5 is an evade. Many people forget that Air 5 is actually an evade. So if you have Air as your secondary element, and you're in a bit of a pickle, you're about to get fucked. You're about to get wrecked. You can use Air 5 to evade. It's an extra dodge. It's an extra dodge, okay? It's not just a CC, it's also a dodge. So in addition to this, Fire 2 and Water 2 can also be used to propel movement, as they are both faster than combat speed running. And that's another thing that I see experienced weavers actually either forgetting about it or not properly implementing it. And I'm sure I've been guilty of it plenty of times too. But I'm just saying, if you use, okay, so what I do is I will click somewhere on the screen where I know I'm not going to click onto someone's nameplate or their character, so I don't have anything targeted. I don't want to have anything targeted. And then if you use Fire 2, you're going to leap forward. You're going to leap away. It's faster. If you use Water 2, it's going to go backwards. It's faster than running. And if you're running Zephyrite runes, you can achieve super speed 2 different ways. I will demonstrate both for you. So you Riptide backwards, you Flame Uprising forward, super speed. Drop a Ring of Fire, Polaric Leap to the enemy while standing inside of it, super speed. And there you have it, folks. That is the Sword Dagger Weaver, the Fire Celestial Sword Dagger Weaver. I think I've covered most of the fundamentals. If I missed anything or if anything is incorrect, feel free to let me know in the comments. And without further ado, thank you for watching the video, and good luck.